I've been reading Edmund Husserl's fifth meditation of his Cartesian meditation this morning, and I'm kind of having some thought here. Kind of noticing. I'm reading about the sphere of Ownness, or the organosphere, the primordial sphere, and it goes from this sphere of Ownness. I have videos about this, but I want to think about it more and kind of notice some problems and why Heidegger's idea is better, and how that could be developed. You know, and kind of how Husserl's idea of associative pairing is not, I guess, as sound as an idea of mortality. But if you read Werner Marx or Alfonso Lingus, you will read about mortality as a similarity between us. Husserl bases this associative pairing, based upon similarities in our bodily organism. So I guess I'm gonna read. I've read that, and I have the Cartesian Meditations on my iPad, but I've been reading that in coincidence with this book, which is one of my favorite books on Husserl. Other ones would be Robert Sokolowski and Dan Zahavi. But this has a really good part in it, which talks about Husserl's experience of the other in it. It's a really good book. If you want to read about Husserl and have a secondary source there with it, I suggest this book. Yeah. Okay. So first of all, we have this sphere of Ownness, this primordial sphere, and essentially, it is in departing from this sphere of Ownness or primordial sphere, thus called by Husserl, that the constitution of the other must be understood. So we have this sphere of Ownness or primordial sphere, and it's within this that everything that the transcendental I experiences is given. So anything that the transcendental I is given is a part of this sphere. It is not easy to understand what the sphere of Ownness or primordial sphere is. Indeed, in Husserl's reflections on the matter, two concepts stemming systematically from different contexts are often intermingled. The two different concepts have in common the fact that both designate a sphere of the I, which is negatively determined by means of excluding every other, all other consciousness in positive terms. However, so we have thoughts of a solipsistic reduction, and we have talks about that. But I want to talk about this with respect to the experience of the other. In the positive, what was I? The other. Oh wait, where am I? In the positive terms, however, Husserl considers the sphere of Ownness or primordial sphere in two respects. On the one hand, he takes it to mean the sphere of the most primordial, self-given is imaginable, the sphere of the best originality conceivable, and primordiality would. So we have primordiality. We have it's primordial original self-givenness. Now, primordiality is a well-known concept. Primordiality is a different one. It's the primordial sphere and the sphere of Ownness can be used interchangeably. And primordiality would seem for him to stand initially for primordial originality. The other understood as alien consciousness, and as the content of this consciousness is not given in such originality. The concept of primordiality as defined by originality is characterized especially by the fact that my experiences of the other and so-called the so-called empathies of the I. So if I say empathies of the I, we're talking about experiences of the other where I am basically a basically way to put that in a nutshell, me being in that person's shoes. Also belong in this primordial sphere, thus defined. For the empathies of the I are indeed its own immanent experiences, and in contrast with alien immanent experiences, are themselves given to the I in the best originality conceivable. So he's talking about how this alien consciousnesses are also, immanently given. So they are essentially a part of this sphere. And I'm gonna get to the problems with this sphere and the experience of the other within this sphere. As defined in this manner, the primordial sphere or sphere of ownness is thus by no means a solipsistic sphere, for it also embraces the ego's immanent experiences of the other. What is excluded is alone the intentional correlates. So we have in normal Husserlian phenomenological intentionality, we have the noesis and the noema. The noesis is the object of intentionality. So if I'm seeing a book or something, the noesis is essentially the act or the object of consciousness, and the noema is the correlated meanings. What is excluded is alone the intentional correlates, the noemata of these immanent experiences. The sphere of the original, as Husserl says, thus designates that which is directly accessible to the I within the entirety of its experience. It is the ensemble of everything which is itself given in the original within all experiences of the I. Everything which is not merely intended indirectly. According to Husserl, the ensemble of everything that is itself given in the original, and this includes nature as well, although not in its inner subjective sense, but only insofar as it is originally experienced by the I, is the whole of everything which is proper to the I. It makes up that which I am in full concretion within myself, or as we also say, within my monad. And monad, I'm gonna get to that too. If Husserl's concept of monad is defined in this way by original self-givenness, then for him the individual monad can be neither something independent nor, in this sense, something concrete. Indeed, Husserl says that within the monad it is only a matter of relative concretion, that is, it is what it is only as associates of a sociality. And then Husserl says, it is not as if each monad were for itself, and thus had being apart from the other monad. Rather, each one, insofar as within its being it has intentionally constituted the others, that is, insofar as it has experience of the others, just as each one in its present has constituted the past, cannot be apart from the others. According to this concept of the sphere of ownness, the monad is the dimension of that which is given itself primordially originally to the I. It is the dimension of which others are mirrored. So we have within the sphere, that's the dimension of the sphere of the I, in which other organisms, alien consciousnesses are mirrored. According to this concept, I'm going to read this again. The concept of the sphere of ownness, the monad is the dimension of that which is given itself primordially originally to the I. The dimension of that which is given itself primordially originally. And it is the dimension in which the others are mirrored. The sphere of ownness, or the primordial sphere, thereby gains for Husserl the sense of a stratum of experience prior to our experience of the other. The stratum of experience belonging to the I, which is supposed to underlie and found the highest stratum, our experience of the other. Okay, so I'm just going to sum this up a little bit here. When we are by taking out the intentional noemata out of the empathies of the I. What's going on is that by doing this, by taking out the noemata of the empathies of the I, what is being allowed is a strata of consciousness. So at first we have a pre-reflective self givenness, or a givenness of everything with a I don't know how to explain this, but more like a it's pretty much a pre-reflective self givenness, and from that, this is a foundation of all stratum of consciousness higher than that. And empathies of the I, experiences of the other is higher than that. So this allows there to be a strata of consciousness. And then he talks about appresentations, a strata of consciousness. And then he talks about appresentations. I'm going to read this. In fact, the solipsistic concept plays the dominant role in determining the point of departure for Husserl's analysis of our experience of the other. Husserl takes this departure from a mere substratum of experience, namely leaving out the account of psychophysical experience of the self, from an experience of a mere nature or body, where in accordance with the primordial epoche, nature and body do not have an inner subjective sense, that they do not have the sense of nature for everyone. He then proceeds to ask how the experience of other psychical beings is a higher stage of experience, is motivated on the basis of this substratum. To be sure, the concept of primordiality, determined by originality, is also applicable to this substratum. So that from the viewpoint of this concept, the problem of our experience of the other consists for Husserl in the question of how the intentionality of such experience presents a there along with mit da, which is itself not there and can never become on itself there, selbst da. In other words, how our experience of the other is possible if it consists in an appresentation which can never be converted into a presentation. In contrast with the transference of sense in the perception of things, the transference of sense is in the perception as a bodily organism of an external body similar to my bodily organism, is distinguished by the fact that here the primordially instituting original is perpetually present in vivid fashion. My own bodily organism is always there along with the other. One's own and the other's organism always make their appearance in perception as a pair, so that the transference of sense is performed in the special form which Husserl calls an association by pairing. According to Husserl, an association by pairing is an associative coinciding par excellence in the perceptual field, in that two perceptually contrasted unities are phenomenally conjoined by way of their similarity by bodily organisms. If a body makes its appearance within my this is Husserl. If a body makes its appearance within my primordial sphere, set off against my body, but similar to it, that is so constituted that it must enter into a phenomenal pairing with mine, then it seems clear without further ado that in the transference of sense, it must forthwith take over the sense bodily organism from my bodily organism. And from this pairing, we can get a intermonatic community, because from the monad of the sphere of allness we have how others, the alien consciousness, and thus the bodily organism of thus is mirrored. And this is Husserl's account of the empathies and thus the associative pairing. Now, I want to critique this first of all by the fact that, well, resting on the fact that I do not agree with looking at how experiences of the other by looking at a similarity by our bodily organism. I think that we should be looking at our similarities by our mortality, our vulnerability. Not only mortality by physical mortality, by the fact that we can be hurt physically, we can almost die, we can die very, very painfully. We can get hurt so that we can't do the things that we normally can do. We can get diseases so that we almost die, but we don't. We can have physical mortality where very large things can come and cripple us. Not only with that, the physical mortality, but we also have emotional mortality. Emotional mortality in that beliefs that we are normally holding on to become shattered and are no longer untrue. Also, that also the fact that we have the possibility of having a mental illness, which makes for more suffering. That it doesn't really come from anything, and we have very fragile, mental states. And if something really, really bad happens here, we're emotionally vulnerable entirely. So I think that we can comport ourselves towards other beings with certain compassion based on this concept of mortality. Because of the mortality I have, I can notice this similarity in others, and not by my bodily organism, but by the sense of mortality that I have, and that I see this same concept of and same trait of mortality in every other human being, and by that I can comport myself towards those other beings. And you find stuff like that in Werner Marx. Werner Marx towards the phenomenological ethics is a very good book. Talks a lot about mortality and sociality, and a lot of his stuff is based on Heidegger as well. And I think that from that, by having similarity based upon our mortality, we can kind of do away with I guess we can do away with thinking of it. I mean, Heidegger talks about spheres, and how it's like he talks about them like being how our experiences can be inside or outside. So he doesn't have spheres in the sense that Husserl does. So what I'm thinking is that if we can base our similarities and comport each other to each other based on this concept of mortality, we can do away with such primordial spheres, and with such substrata of consciousness, to think of each other as Dasein, or being in the world, and think of it in the way that Heidegger thinks about it, in that and that Dasein is in each case mine, and how it's also in each case yours as well. You are a case of Dasein as well, and you are being in the world as well. And we can think about it that way, and that I think, if we were going to form a kind of idea of experience of the other, and formings of community based on this relation of similarity, it should be based on mortality, rather than, and not by mortality, and not so much similarities in bodily organism. I don't think that will allow us to comport ourselves to each other so well. So that was just, I wanted to critique that and think about it that way, because Husserl does have a very good idea of experience of the other. I just have problems because I don't like how the intentional noemata are taken out, so that he can afford to have a strata of consciousness, and how that empathy is a higher level of consciousness, when in fact it's all one world, ontologically speaking, and we don't have to think about it in terms of this sphere. We can think about it as a world as such. So, I mean, I can go into to talk about Heidegger more in depth, but I just think that we should move towards thinking about the world in terms of Heidegger thinking about it, and thinking about similarities between each other in terms of mortality, and not bodily organisms similarity. After having just done that video, I forgot that there was a couple things I would have liked to add to it. It's 20 minutes anyway, so I'm gonna have to cut it and then upload it and then put it back together on YouTube in one video anyway. So I might as well. Pretty much what I was thinking is that if we think about similarity with respect to mortality, and that I'm going to slit on my foot or something. And I'm going to if I'm gonna think about similarity as in mortality between each other, how we're both mortal physically and emotionally, I think that this would allow for intentional correlates of noemata. I think that we can afford for that. If we think about similarity in terms of mortality between each other, not as bodily organisms, then we can afford to have. We can afford to have this intentional correlates of noema, pretty much, and then also because of that, we don't have to think about consciousness in terms of the strata that Husserl is talking about. We don't have to think about it like that at all. We can essentially think about Dasein's consciousness as, well, essentially being in the world. Being in the world is pretty much, because pretty much what Heidegger talks about is consciousness. Consciousness. He doesn't use the word consciousness, but that's essentially what he's talking about. And being in the world is essentially a consciousness. It's essentially a consciousness. Now we can break that down into spheres, and I think Heidegger does. And Heidegger does use the word spheres here and there, but he doesn't use it to the extent that Husserl does when talking about experiences of the others. So what I'm thinking is that we can think about the sphere of Ownness that Husserl is talking about in terms of being in the world, to where this being in the world is basically one sphere encompassing all of the world and all of its beings. And this being in the world is essentially this huge sphere, this limitless sphere that belongs to Dasein. Being in the world is essentially a state for Dasein, a state of Dasein, actually. And being in the world is really it's no sphere at all, but we can think about it as this one huge limitless sphere that encompasses the whole world that Dasein can be a part of, and think about it making the world as this one big sphere that because that the unity being in the world can it includes any ontological or ontic reality that any Dasein could have. So those are just my extra thoughts, because that's very. I think that we can just break it down in terms of what Heidegger is saying. Let me know your thoughts if you have any.